Most teachers have experienced a moment like this. A student becomes frustrated during a task and shuts down. Two classmates misunderstand one another, and a small disagreement suddenly erupts and interrupts the lesson. And another student quietly withdraws when learning begins to feel difficult. And in these moments, we're not only teaching academic subjects, we're teaching so much more. In my early years in the classroom, I had two girls who, well, in the language of the time, might have been called frenemies. They were both strong leaders, they liked each other, they were admired by the other students. But they were also endlessly competing for that leadership position. So at least once a week, there would be a reason for the two of them to gather at my desk during snack or lunch to resolve some conflict that had happened outside. At first, I would say, sure, let's work through that. Bring your snack to my desk or your lunch kit, and we would sit together and practice listening and conflict resolution. Over time, something interesting began to happen. One of them would come through the door after recess or lunch and quietly ask if she could eat at my desk. And we all knew what that meant. So moments like that are a good reminder that in classrooms we are not only teaching academic subjects, we are also helping students learn how to understand emotions, communicate with others, and navigate challenges. Huge part of the classroom day. And really, that's where social emotional learning begins. In this video, I want to take a closer look at what social emotional learning means in the classroom and why it plays such an important role in how classrooms function. We'll look at a number of things, what social emotional learning is, why these moments appear so often, and a few simple classroom systems that help students gradually develop these skills. Social emotional learning, often shortened to SEL, is the process of helping students develop the skills needed to understand emotions, build relationships, and make thoughtful decisions. In classrooms, this often means helping students. They're going to learn how to recognize emotions, communicate respectfully, and manage frustration so learning can continue. Many classroom challenges appear when students are still learning how to manage emotions in relationships. So when frustration builds or misunderstandings occur, students may react quickly because they have the tools to pause and think about the situation and even through the situation. Over time, when students begin developing emotional awareness and communication skills, those classroom moments often become easier to navigate. Students arrive at school with very different levels of emotional awareness. Some students already recognize when they are becoming frustrated. Others are still learning how to identify what they are feeling or that they are feeling something. So one simple classroom system that supports this is emotion check-ins. And honestly, sometimes this can be very simple. In my class, we would just pause during the day and ask, okay, how's everybody doing? If the class seemed overwhelmed or restless, we might take a short active break or just step away from the work for a moment, or even go on to the next activity and I knew I had compressed too much into that time for their developmental age. At other times, I placed a small check-in graph near the classroom door and students would quietly indicate how they were feeling when they arrived in the morning and then again after recess and after lunch. Over time, students began to recognize patterns in their emotional energy throughout the day, and that matters and it helps them. Because many behavior challenges appear when students are trying to manage emotions they don't yet recognize. So when students begin naming those emotions, they often gain just a little bit more control over their reactions. Because remember, they're just developing all of these executive functioning skills. So another simple classroom system that supports emotional learning is reflection. In my classroom, we often reflected after experiences like when we completed a unit, when we returned from a field trip, or if we had heard a guest speaker. Like after our local SPCA visited. These moments help students pause and think about what they had learned and how they wanted to approach their learning moving forward. Some teachers also use weekly reflection journals that travel home with the students. That was not my practice, but it's beloved by some teachers. That gives families a small window into how students are thinking about their learning. Reflection shows classroom thinking down just enough for students to notice their choices and to begin to learn from them. Conflict is also a normal part of classroom life. Students are learning how to communicate, cooperate, and share space with others all day long. One helpful classroom system is a simple conflict resolution routine. Pause and take a breath, explain what happened, listen without interrupting, identify the problem, decide on a possible solution. Some classrooms create a small discussion space or a peace table where those conversations can happen more calmly. In my classroom, I guided them through the steps. They were 6 and 7 years old. But meanwhile, conflict isn't unusual. What matters most is helping students learn how to solve their problems respectfully. One moment teachers often notices how quickly frustration can spread during challenging work. A student becomes stuck, frustration rises, suddenly they're no longer focused on the task. When students have practiced identifying emotions and pausing before reacting, they're often able to recover more quickly and return to their learning. So what we're really looking at here is how emotional awareness and relationship skills support learning. When students develop these abilities, the classroom environment often becomes calmer and more cooperative. So these routines gradually become part of a classroom system that helps students understand how learning and relationships work throughout the day. It can be helpful to pause and consider a simple question for you. When frustration or disagreement appears in your classroom, what strategies do students currently have for understanding and managing those feelings? So social emotional learning is one part of my Calm Classroom framework. I mentioned it earlier that I developed it. And this helps teachers build calm, predictable classrooms through clear expectations, routines, and supportive classroom systems. Each pillar works together to support both behavior and learning. Social emotional learning isn't a single lesson or program. It grows slowly through many small classroom conversations and experiences, and over time, students begin to understand their emotions more clearly, and they begin to be able to communicate their feelings more thoughtfully, and they're going to be able to recover from challenges more quickly over time. So often it's the smallest classroom systems that make the biggest difference in how a classroom feels each day. If you're exploring ways to build calmer classroom systems, I've written more about social emotional learning on my blog, and I'm going to link that in the first comment and in the description. And if you're looking for a simple starting point, you might also want to download my free Calm Classroom Foundations Guide, which is helpful and introduces you to my systems. Bye for now.